In this section, let me just do one more example with some B class or A class kind of examples with some more complex range I'll use. Let's say there is an address called 150.12.125.10 with a slash value of 22. Let's check 22. Okay, now you want to find the range. Same thing you need to find. You want to find what is the subnet mask, the same numbers I can say. Whatever we calculated, we want to find the same thing. Subnet mask, host address, broadcast, host per subnet, broadcast ID, network ID, everything. Exactly the same thing, okay? So I want to find the same thing for this address. Now it's a B class address. By seeing itself, we can see here. Let's try to figure out the first three answers first, and then we'll come back to the network ID and the broadcast ID. So first, subnet mask. Again, to find the subnet mask, we need to take /22. So we can write 8 plus 8 plus 8 plus 8, 16, 16 plus 6, it becomes 22, and the last portion will be 0. So the subnet mask will be 255.255.252.0. That is the subnet mask. And then to find how many hosts per subnet, and the formula we know, 2 to the power of h minus 2. Minus 2 is for network ID and the broadcast ID. So to find the h value from 32, if I subtract 22, I get 10. This is my h value. This is my host bits, right? So I'm subtracting from total bits minus network bits to get my host bits, right? So 2 to the power of 10. So the formula is 2 to the power of 10 minus 2. So it will be 1024 minus 2. So it will be 1022. This is my valid host per subnet. This is your answer. This is my second answer. And the third thing, if you want to find how many subnets we get, so if you want to find how many subnets we get, we need to take 2 to the power of n value, whereas n is your converted network bits. Now in my scenario, the slash value is 26. Now right now I'm using, this is a B class example. So in the B class there are 16 default network bits and 6 are converted network bits, right? It's a B class, right? 150 comes in between the range of B class. So in the B class there are 16 network bits by default and there are 6 converted bits. So I'm going to take 2 to the power of 6, 2 to the power of 6, 64 subnets. If I divide a B class network in the size of 1024, I get 64 subnets. Okay, so totally get 65,536 addresses. So mostly the calculation up to here, it is going to be the same like what we did in the previous examples with a simple C class, only the size varies. Now let us try to figure out what will be the network ID and the broadcast ID. So to find the network ID and the broadcast ID, we need to figure out the range. Now writing the range, you should be very good in writing the range here. Now the range always written based on the 2 to the power of h value. Right now the h value is 10. Why? Because from 32, if I subtract this 22, I get 10. So 2 to the power of 10. So the size of the network is 1024 is the size of the network. So if you remember in the B class, whenever you get a size of big networks, we use 2 to the power of h divided by 256. So 1024 divided by 256, what we get? We get how many blocks? 4 blocks of addresses. So which means we need to write multiples of 4. So the first portion will be 0.0 and the next portion will be 4.0 and we write multiples of 4, right? So the multiples of 4 times 40. Still we need to go because very long, we need to reach 125. So we can skip some addresses. I can write +4 +4 +4 80.0, and then similarly if you go on write 120.0, I'm writing the nearest multiple of 4, and now we need to write 124.0 and then 128.0. Now we need to reach to 125, so it will be 124.0 to 127.255. So this is the range. In this range my address is going to come, okay, because of the size. Now this is my network ID and this is my broadcast ID. So Now our network ID and the broadcast ID will be, so the network ID will be 150.12.124.0 is the network ID, and the broadcast ID will be 150.12.127.255. For both /file is 22, /file is 22. So this is how we calculate the network ID and the broadcast ID. The only difference between the previous example and this example is when you have a bigger network sizes, we know how to write them in the blocks, and we increment in the third portion because of the size of the network here, and that's how we need to calculate. So the more you keep on practicing these examples, the more you're going to master this. So I got some exercises for you to do this subnetting. I got some exercises like you need to find the same thing for subnet mask, write down the subnet mask and find the range and how many valid host addresses and how many subnets. Some examples, you just keep on practicing these examples to just master these subnetting questions. And apart from that, if you want to try to understand some subnetting questions, so if you just go to google.com and if you find some subnetting questions here, subnetting, even you find some subnetting calculators also for calculations. Just go to Google and find some subnetting questions. You will find different kinds of subnetting questions. Probably you can go through with any one of these websites and you can find some subnetting questions and you can answer that. Let's say if you go to this website, you'll find some, what is a valid host range and what is the IP address range, like this. So now to answer this, you should be very good. Now he's asking you what is the valid host range of the IP address. This one, he's asking you the range. So the range always written based on 2 to the power of h value. 2 to the power of h value is how much? H value is how much here? It is 20. Sorry, /value is 20 here. So the h value is 12. So 12 means 2 to the power of 12. The size of the network is how much? 2 to the power of 12 is 4096. So 4096 means how many blocks? 16 blocks. So 16 blocks means we need to, the range comes from 0.0, 16.0, 32.0, 48.0, like that it will go on. But he's asking you 172.26.255. So it's a very long, it's almost on the end. So better if you start from the bottom. 250, if you're coming from bottom, you need to subtract from 256. So the last end will be 240.0 to 255.255. So the answer is, the answer will be from, the range will be from 172.26. The answer will be 172.26. 240.0 is the network ID and 255.255 is the broadcast ID. Let me just reveal the answer. You can see this is the valid range. 240.0, which means you cannot use the network ID, so the valid address will be 240.1 and the answer will be 255.255. So 255.255 you cannot use because it's a broadcast ID, so we can use the valid host address. You can see the question says valid host address, the addresses which you can assign to any device. So one address before. So similar way, this is how the questions will be asked. A little bit more tricky. The main part is to understand the question. So similar way, you can just go with the next question, like you are designing some subnets, you want 40 subnets, something like that. So similar way, you can go ahead and you can figure out, you can go through with some subnetting questions. Just keep practicing couple of questions every day to understand how the questions are asked. So when you go through with these questions, it will give some idea on how the questions can be asked in your certification exams. So whatever the questions I have given you here, it is more like a straightforward question. So it will only help you to calculate, but when you go through with those online questions, probably you will understand, you will see how the questions can be asked in your certification exams.